So Jacob Harmon is our next presenter, and Jacob is a board-certified music therapist. He's currently in his final semester of the graduate equivalency program at UMKC. He recently completed his internship at University Health Truman Medical Center's Behavioral Health Acute Care, which is a national roster site in Kansas City, Missouri. And he has a background in instrumental music education through teaching band in the Kentucky public school system. So I will let Jacob take it away.
All right. So my presentation for you today is Music Therapy Meets Metal, Potential Clinical Applications. So what we're going to talk about today is kind of looking at the use of metal music within established music therapy interventions on acute care behavioral health unit. I'm going to talk a little bit how this project came to be and how it evolved. Look at some of the literature and the studies on metal music and preferred metal listening, and some interventions and music in the psychiatric setting. And then I'm going to give you some examples of how I've implemented these in actual sessions and talk about some of the outcomes. So we're going to play some music for you. I'm going to perform how I kind of adapted it. So and I'll have chord charts. So if you want to grab your guitar and play along, hey, it's going to be a good time. So this project kind of started during internship, and it kind of started as a resource for the music therapists in the department to help those patients who prefer metal. And we kind of found that, so I am a huge metalhead. I love metal. And we found out that like my supervisors, some other folks weren't as familiar with the genre. And it kind of started off as that. So here's metal, here's common bands, here's common themes. And then it started to evolve because, it's not only we need to be familiar with the genre, but also how can we implement it effectively in a session with our therapeutic intents, our goals, our objectives, everything like that. And then it's also kind of like, well, what is metal? It's this huge umbrella term for a lot of like subgenres and crossovers. So but some common things are just like those extended vocal techniques you might like consider screaming, and electronic instruments, amplified instruments, things of that nature. But there's a lot of subgenres, power metal, thrash metal, hardcore, black metal, folk metal, symphonic metal, even like trap metal is a new genre, a new subgenre that's kind of popping up, and there's just so much out there. But what I found success in implementing is music from the metalcore genre, which kind of takes the more visceral tonalities and timbres from like hardcore and some of those musical elements, and kind of fuses it with some more accessible melodies and hooks in the choruses. So taking a little look at the literature when it comes to preferred metal listening. Going through some of the literature, some commonalities started to pop up. One were people who listen to metal music and prefer it kind of form protective factors from that genre and being involved with it, including things like self-acceptance, connection to shared social values and connection to others, affirming a shared identity, like fans of Lady Gaga, Little Monsters, fans of Slipknot, maggots. Similar things, but there's a sense of community within it. And kind of these surviving stress of challenging environments that you may encounter. There's some indicators that it helps in emotional processing. So, rates of depression and anxiety are kind of similar to or below that of the general population who don't prefer metal. Metal can match some of the physiological arousal that we experience and kind of lead us to an increased amount of positive emotions. Also looking at like cathartic effects and helping just being able to overall process some difficult emotions. And there's also some indications that a preference for metal can indicate some emotional vulnerability, but that vulnerability comes from the environment that you're in, not from the music. And that kind of suggests that people use this music that addresses some intense emotions and some intense things to help process what they're going through. So Yeah, we have an idea of why people like metal and why we listen to metal, but um, how can we translate that right to the population that we're working with, adult acute behavioral health, when people come in? And I thought, well, let's go to the literature. Let's see what the studies out there say about the use of metal within an acute psychiatric behavioral health setting. And the answer is not a lot. But we do kind of provides with a lot of other things. So common interventions that we kind of see and use: lyric analysis, songwriting, active music making, lots of different group topics, coping skills, stress tolerance, psychoeducation, talking about stigma, just encouraging healthy emotional expression. But as far as the music goes, there's not a whole lot on the use of metal. There's a wide wide variety of music that we use, but nothing specifically on metal. If you have a study out there or found something that references it, please send it to me. I would love to see it. But I have difficulty finding it. But overall, the songs that we kind of choose are, and here's an example of that from Markovich and Tasumi, 2015, is that we choose these songs for their therapeutic benefit. We have our group, we have our group goals, we have patient preference, we have the individual goals, whatever it may be. We choose a song that's therapeutically beneficial. And really, the only kind of like song, for example, in this list that they use in one of their interventions, as close as Linkin Park, but that's from more of their kind of alternative rock um, album, not necessarily their earlier, more metal sound. Now, just a quick recap. So, we know that preferred listeners of metal have to get some benefits from it. There appears to be a gap in the literature in the use of metal in this acute psychiatric setting. So, then how can we implement it, right? How can we take what we know about interventions and goals and objectives within the psychiatric setting and put metal within it to better help those who prefer the genre? So I'm going to kind of show you a brief, like 2 sessions that I've done in relation to this. So it was designed using the single session format. Um, so, it's a quick turnover rate, not very long admission, maybe only see the folks once and like that group for once a week. But I had the self-expression time slot, which is a pretty broad topic, but you can incorporate and implement a lot of things into that topic of self-expression. And it was a full hour session, so a lot of time to take up. And I paired lyric analysis with songwriting. So I chose 2 songs. The song "In Between" by Beartooth, and I paired that with a blues songwriting. And then I chose the song "Scars" by I Prevail and paired that with a fill in the Blank songwriting. Oh, so yeah, Sydney. Adults. This was on an adult inpatient psychiatric behavioral health unit. So just the session at a glance, we're kind of looking at some of these group goals. So we're looking at healthy self-expression within a group setting. We're talking about long-term goal identification, barriers that might be in the way to your goal, and ways to kind of get past and cope with those barriers. And so I use the song "In Between" to kind of facilitate that discussion. And I always try to use some kind of visualization like that. Sometimes I draw on the board, and we, write, well, here's where you want to be, here's where you are, how can you get there? And then we translate that into a blues songwriting, and relate each verse to one of the topics that we discussed. So now comes the music part. So I'm going to play for you a couple of snippets of the original version of the song, and then I'm going to show you kind of how I have translated that to an acoustic version. And as we listen, if you could just kind of think about some of the musical considerations that you may have to take into account whenever you're transferring it over to a more accessible acoustic voice version for a group setting. All right. So that's kind of the first little bit. As we can already see, there's some things we might need to take into consideration, some of the screaming that's going on, and we can also kind of work with some of the lyric analysis, working with like the metaphor of a mountain and thinking about being up on the mountain, talking about, the perspective that you get while you're up there. And it's easy to say, this is where I want to be. It's easy to say, this is where I am. But the stuff that's in between is the hard stuff. And that's kind of how it develops. Now, going on musically to some more musical considerations, I'm going to fast forward just a wee bit here. And we're going to start at the end of the second chorus and go into the bridge for this. Hey, run away, don't run away, run up on the mountain, I see down below. It's easy to lose yourself, I know. Can't hear what you're shouting, I'm deaf to the mountain, I see down below. It's easy to lose yourself, I know. In the in-between. All right, so there, a little bit more of that, and so it's a great lyric analysis song, and people get really into it. And we talk about not letting pain get in your way, not being silent, finding the strength and support system, strength in numbers, and really pushing through whatever it is that you're going through. But how do we translate that to a group setting with acoustic guitar? So the verses are screamed, and translating that, there is that underlying harmonic structure to it that you can take on and draw on, and just kind of create your own melody for it. When it comes to that kind of bridge breakdown section, there's some more, electric guitar stuff that is happening. That's not as easy to do on acoustic, but you can still play like the chord structure and do like a little bit of riffing and change in between a couple of chord shapes to still have that rock feel to it. but then also the overall like chord structure to the song is really simple. It's really not that difficult at all. Once you get into it, especially in the chorus, it's just the four chords for any pop song. So we kind of look at how we can translate this over. A couple of things. So when you think about the verse and the translating that over, I am playing guitar. I'm capoing on three and playing these shapes. So we have. So it's all still there, and you just make a melody on top of that. When it comes to the bridge and everything's a little bit more rocky, and I it's also the reason why I like to use these shapes is because I can move my fingers around, make some seventh chords, do some suspensions to make it sound more rocky. So like and something like that. You can just play around with it, and it's easier, and it's chord shape. So this is an abridged version, but I'm gonna sing it. I'm gonna play it. If you want to play along, follow along, hey, feel free. Life's so dark when every day is a struggle. Why go out and see the world on fire? Don't let your mindset become what controls you. Speak right now and make the choice to grow. Don't run away, run away, run away. Don't run away, run away. And up on the mountain, I see down below. It's easy to lose yourself, I know. Can hear what you're shouting, I'm deaf to your show. It's easy to lose your self-control. Everybody gets high, everybody gets low. Life can be such overdose. And up on the mountain, I see down below. It's easy to lose yourself, I know. In the in-between. I won't let pain get in my way. I can't have silence claiming me. We have strength in numbers to get us through the day. No compromises to be made. This is a war we're gonna win. We have strength in numbers to get us through the day. And up on the mountain, I see down below. It's easy to lose yourself, I know. Can't hear what you're shouting, I'm deaf to your show. It's easy to lose your self-control. Everybody gets high, everybody gets low. And life can be such overdose. And up on the mountain, I see down below. It's easy to lose yourself, I know. In the in-between. Whoa, in the in-between. So, an example of how you can translate a metal song into an acoustic version for a group setting. So, like I said, we use that to talk about those things of where you want to be, what are going to be your barriers in the way, how are you going to get through it, the in between being the hard part for that, and then make a blues songwriting out of it, and it's a really good time. So the second session I'm going to share with you is has some goals of, again, healthy self-expression in a group setting, but we're kind of talking more about resiliency, authenticity, and how those topics kind of relate to your current experience. And we do a lyric analysis of the song Scars by I Prevail. I think it's kind of funny. I think it was Carrie Underwood said that she really likes I Prevail, so I thought that was a pretty good plug. And then after we talk about resiliency and authenticity using lyric analysis of scars, we do a fill in the blank songwriting of "You Gotta Be" by Desiree. Shout out to Dr. Amy Robertson for that song. Um, but then it's how can you we do a lyric rewrite, and it's how can you relate that to your experiences? What do you got to be resilient, to be authentic, to um, you know get through what you're getting through, work towards the goals that you are. So a little bit of this song, same thing. We're going to kind of jump around just a little bit and hear what the song sounds like originally.
Try to tear us apart, but no matter where our scars. Excuses are all that I hear. All I can see when I look in the mirror. I can't escape all these thoughts in my mind. They're waiting to haunt me night after night. Feeling in my bones and everything I know. It's underneath my skin and it won't let go. They know me all too well, but only time will tell. If this is who I am, do I know myself? Don't forget your life's your own. Don't ever let it go. In the heat of the moment, the fear has you frozen. You're crushing and burning when life's at its coldest. Don't fall too far from who you are. They can cut us from where our scars. In the heat of the moment, the fear has you frozen. You're crushing and burning when life's at its coldest. Don't fall too far from who you are. Try to tear us apart, but know that we'll wear our scars. Try to tear us. Don't fall too far from who you are. Try to tear us apart.
All right, sorry about I forgot that I was on mute. so so a little bit of the first verse and the chorus, or we kind of see talking about some of the things you might be going through. What is the thing that gave you a scar? How did you get through it? How are you being who you are? How are you taking back your life and being sure that your life's your own and not letting it go? Kind of working on those topics: resiliency, authenticity. Fast forwarding, going to go into the bridge and into the last chorus, and again, just like the first song, it's a little bit more kind of raucous, a little bit more intense.
Know that we'll wear our scars. You can cut us off, but we will survive. You had your chance, now it's our time to stand up and we will survive. Right now the table's turned. We're gonna scream it out loud and let our voices be heard. In the heat of the moment, when fear has you frozen, you're crashing and burning. When life's at its coldest, don't fall too far from who you are.
All right, so a little bit of samples from every part of that song. So when you think about the musical considerations that we may need to take to transfer that over for a group setting for a patient, there are two vocalists in this group. And so there are times when they're trading off those vocal lines and it's just going one to the other, and there's no break in between that. And so what I'll do is sometimes I'll just like extend the measure by just a couple of counts so I can catch a breath. I might leave out like one word here or there so I can get a breath to do what I need to do. And then the bridge breakdown section, it's almost entirely again, like the first song, almost entirely screaming. And so, and the harmonic content is kind of different from everything else in the song. So how I adapt that is I take the material that was already present from the verse and I make that the bridge. And then I, again, like the first song, just kind of create a melody on top of it. Now I know that in the screaming, sometimes there is like a tonal center in the scream, but it's obviously really distorted using that technique. So that's what I do. I take the stuff from the verse, make it the bridge, create my own melody for it. And for example, in the first verse, in the original version, they're waiting to haunt me night after night. I feel it in my bones. It goes really quick in the original version, but at night after night, I hold out that B minor chord just a little bit longer to give myself a second. So gonna give this a go as well. Kind of show you how I've translated that song to this group setting. Again, I'm capoing 3 as well again, and using the same chord shapes. Excuses are all that I hear. All I can see when I look in the mirror. I can't escape all these thoughts in my mind. They're waiting to haunt me night after night. I feel it in my bones and everything I know. It's underneath my skin and it won't let go. They know me all too well, but only time will tell. This is who I am. Do I know myself? Don't forget your life's your own. Don't ever let it go. In the heat of the moment, fears are frozen. You're crashing and burning. Life's at its coldest. Don't fall too far from who you are. They can cut us, but we'll wear our scars. In the heat of the moment, fears are frozen. Crashing and burning. Life's at its coldest. Don't fall too far from who you are. Try to tear us apart, but know that we'll wear our scars. You can cut us up, but we will survive. You've had your chance, now it's our time to stand up and rise. Yeah, we will survive. Right now the tables turn. We're gonna scream it out loud and let our voices be heard. In the heat of the moment, when fear has you frozen, crashing and burning, when life's at its coldest. Don't fall too far from who you are. They can cut us, but we'll wear our scars. In the heat of the moment, when fear has you frozen, crashing and burning, when life's at its coldest. Don't fall too far from who you are. Try to tear us apart, but know that we'll wear our scars. Right, so example of that as well, adapting some of that screaming, some of those chord progressions to this. So talking about some of the outcomes that have happened whenever I use these songs. So I think I saw a question here. That's a great question, Kara. So yeah, the kind of preferred versus non-preferred listeners in the group. The preferred listeners, it always seems to be the preferred listeners say, I've never heard an acoustic version of that song before. That was really interesting. And then they're also really engaged with the group. They're really engaged with discussion because they're familiar with the song and they like that they can relate to the song because they prefer it. When it comes to the people who may not prefer that genre, it's still acoustic, it's still more accessible. And even though they haven't heard the song prior to the group, they still engage with it appropriately and are able to talk about the themes and the intent of the group, and get those positive outcomes that we work towards. Yeah. So, and kind of the summary of this, there's preferred listeners receive benefits from this genre of music, but there's also a gap in literature when it comes to the implementation of it in this kind of group setting in the acute psychiatric behavioral health population. And there are songs within some genres that can be therapeutically beneficial and relate to the therapeutic intent of the group that you're doing. And there are ways to adapt these songs for acoustic guitar and voice. The chords really aren't that simple. Take some creativity, some creative license when it comes to adapting some screaming sections. And, there are ways to implement some of these songs into established music therapy interventions, like lyric analysis. And overall, there are some potential clinical applications here to cater to some of our service users who prefer that genre, and where we may not always use some of that genre within these interventions that we see. Eventually, I think I would like to turn this into a more cohesive study down the road. But here are references that have informed this project. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me at my email here, and I will open it up, I guess, to Q&A.
So I think we have one question in the chat. Gab's asking if you can link your presentation to the chat for us to access.
I can do that.
Awesome.
I've got a question. What kind of inspired you to research this more?
Yeah. So I kind of noticed as going through my internship that I was able to build rapport really well with some of the folks who were on the unit who preferred that genre, because I was one of the only people there that shared that interest with them, and where that music was such an integral part of their life and who they were. I thought, well, hey, it seems like we're not, implementing this for them as much as we could. And so that kind of really what lit the fire to pursue it more.
Just so they don't get lost, Sydney asked, what changes to the presentation would you make for adolescents?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I haven't thought a whole lot about it. So I would need to take a look at some literature and do some thinking before I gave an educated answer on that. So I haven't really thought about, haven't really explored the adolescent side of things, but I would be interested in doing so.
I'll get to the other questions, I promise, but that is kind of related to something that I was thinking, which, since you work with adults, you might not have run into it, but did you ever have any pushback with your facility that you were working in, as far as like using this genre, or having it be considered like too controversial to use in your sessions? No? Okay.
No. Oh, I forgot to, put my special thanks there at the end. No. So whenever I, would pitch this, to my supervisor, I'd always, be sure that I had all my ducks in a row. I had the evidence behind it, the therapeutic intent, the plan in place. And I had a very supportive supervisor as well who, let me kind of explore this and collaborated with me on it. So, but no, I didn't receive any pushback.
That's wonderful. Okay, and then so Danny wants to know, do you have any recommendations for us non-metal fans for a place to start listening? That's a really great question.
That is a great question. um, yes, there's so many bands out there, and when it comes to finding like your, whatever you prefer, I think I would recommend a couple of those bands that I showcased today. Um, Beartooth, I Prevail. There's a really there's a newer band out there who's fronted by a female vocalist, and she incorporates the singing, both singing and screaming. They're called Spirit Box, and they are really good. It's really just kind of going down the rabbit hole. I mean, there's so much out there. Um, you know, bands like Bring Me the Horizon now um, were our popular metal band, and they're doing some collaborations now with like Ed Sheeran and MGK on a more commercial scale. Like bands like Of Mice and Men. It all kind of depends, and yeah, I would just say just start, just start and see where it goes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm just starting a new job where I have to commute like an hour each way to work, so this is going to be on the list.
Okay.
Sammy, since Skillet has good uplifting lyrics. Yeah, and so I know they're a Christian metal band, if I'm not mistaken. I think, um, and so there are some of those, out there, out there as well. There's there's like I said, there's so many subgenres, and there's kind of something for everybody. Just finding your niche and what you like, and exploring it more, and then saying, oh hey, how might this be beneficial? Or asking a client like, hey, do you like metal, what do you like, and then going down that road as well.
I have one more question if nobody else is jumping in. So have you ever looked into like the screamo kind of vocal technique and how to replicate that in like a healthy way? I know there are like certain voice teachers who kind of specialize in doing the screaming kind of singing in a way that isn't damaging to your voice. And I'm a vocalist and I teach voice, and that's something I've always been interested in but kind of afraid of. So I know like with the way you do it, you kind of just use your own, you make it your own and don't really incorporate as much of that screaming kind of sound. But how might you kind of explore that, especially with if you have a client who really wants to hear that in the session?
Well, back in the day, I was in a couple of bands, and I did those kind of vocal techniques. And back in the day when I was younger, I did them wrong, and I messed up my voice a little bit. So, I mean, I would say that if somebody is interested in hearing that, um, yeah, we need to practice. I know, there's like there's some of the, there's the fry screams, there's like the false chords, there's more of the gutturals down there. There's some of the really high stuff, but that's I have never implemented that in a session, and just especially in a group session, for me, I'm not sure if that would be totally appropriate just for um, my camp. But on a one-on-one session, who knows? Who knows?
Thank you. Yeah, I also, coming from an opera background, would be afraid to approach that, but it's something just curious about to explore.
If nobody else has any quick questions for Jacob, I want to respect our time and still have time for a quick little break. So thank you so much for presenting on that, Jacob. I know it was super interesting for me, something I don't really think about a lot, is how to do metal. So awesome presentation.